Kim Potter murdered my son, and he died April 11th. Today, the justice system murdered him all over again.
That is the mother of Daunte Wright, who was killed by Minneapolis police officer Kim Potter when Kim Potter says she intended to tase him but used the wrong weapon, and Daunte Wright ended up dying. She was sentenced finally today to 2 years in prison, of which she might not spend the entirety. And we are gonna talk about why exactly the sentence ended up being so low. To catch you up though, she was originally convicted back in December for first-degree and second-degree manslaughter in the April 11th killing of Wright, who was pulled over for having expired license plate tags and an air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror. Officers learned he had an outstanding warrant for weapons possession charge, and he pulled away as they tried to arrest him. Video shows that Potter shouted several times that she was going to tase him, but she had her actual firearm in her hand and fired one shot into his chest. Now, that brings us to the actual sentencing, and the judge in this case, who apparently really wanted to focus on empathy for the police officer. Here is a little bit of that.
It is the sentence and judgment of this court that you shall be committed to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 24 months. You shall serve 2/3 of that time, or 16 months in prison, and 1/3 on supervised release, assuming no disciplinary offenses. I recognize there will be those who disagree with this sentence, that I granted a significant downward departure does not in any way diminish Daunte Wright's life. Please try to empathize with Ms. Potter's situation. As President Barack Obama once said, learning to stand in somebody else's shoes, to see through their eyes, that's how peace begins.
So as is alluded to there by Judge Chu, it is obviously not a very lengthy sentence, and she and the defense lawyers, fairly working in tandem there, will try to make a case for why that should be the case, why we should not be frustrated by that. But again, bear in mind, 2 years, of which only 16 months necessarily will be served according, assuming good behavior. And by the way, in Minnesota, the ranges for the most serious offense that she was convicted for range from 6 years to about 8.5 years. Judges are not supposed to be able to go significantly below that without like a real good reason, effectively. And she believes that exists, the judge does. We will get into some of the arguments that were made there, but I want to give the panel an opportunity to weigh in.
Okay, so let's go through a couple of numbers here. She's already served 58 days, it's about 2 months. So she'll be out in a little over a year, that's it. Daunte Wright, on the other hand, will remain deceased. And so that's the thing about murder, it's permanent. And so she was convicted. This is almost jury nullification by the judge, saying, I don't care what the jury said, I like the cop. So a lot of black men have gone before judges in this country, and the judges have said, oh, there's nothing I could do. It's the minimum sentence. Minimum sentence, there's nothing I could do, even if I wanted to do it. And oftentimes they get way more than the minimum sentence. Well, apparently there was something they could do. Apparently, if it's a white cop, you can just ignore the minimum. Who cares? Over 6 years, that's the least she's supposed to get. The average, by the way, is about 7 years. She's like, I don't care. I don't care. I'm just gonna give her less. I like her. I empathize with her. So Daunte Wright, we empathize with apparently a little less. So all that talk of empathy and then quoting Barack Obama, that nice touch. Even Joy Reid, noted conservative Democrat, was like, don't quote Obama here. You should have quoted Martin Luther King. When Joy Reid's telling you not to quote Barack Obama, something's really amiss. Okay, so yeah, I mean, but which way does the empathy slide in your slippery slope of empathy? And so now one more number for you guys. There's a potential Biden Supreme Court nominee, Michelle Childs. All the conservative Democrats and all the Republicans are pushing for her, of course. So one, she's incredibly corporate friendly. That's obviously why they love her. And I'm so worried to death that Biden's gonna pick her. But a story broke today, coincidentally, that she's also really tough on crime. So she'd given a guy who sold 8 ounces of weed, 8 ounces, 12 years in prison. So that guy is getting 12 years in prison. Kim Potter, who killed Daunte Wright, is gonna get a little over a year.
Insane.
Insane.
No, and you're exactly right. I mean, look, this judge said that this was one of the quote saddest cases that she'd ever had to rule on. And mind you, given what we just heard her say, that's not sad because Daunte Wright is no longer alive and his children have to grow up without a father and his mother has to grow up without a son. That's not what she means. She means because she's only seeing this from the cop's perspective. That's why it's sad. And yet, Cenk, my guess is that this judge has also sentenced nonviolent drug offenders for far more years than 2 years for taking someone's life for the possession of a small amount of illicit substances. Like, I know that to be true. This judge has worked on the bench for 20 years. Okay, but let's put ourselves in the shoes of this police officer. This police officer was a veteran of 26 years working for the police department. 26 years and still didn't know the difference between their taser and their gun. I don't even know how that works. I wouldn't even understand that because after 26 years of being on the job and you still don't know in a moment of sort of heightened tensions because, oh yeah, this big old criminal has an air freshener hanging from his rear view mirror. That is a sign of a cold-blooded killer. What? Yeah. I don't even know where to begin to put myself in someone's shoes like that.
Yeah, and I think, look, you can accurately say that every part of this is sad. I can even try to imagine, after having done it, how you would feel. That does not mean that you should not spend quite a bit of time behind the bars. And we'll get into the different reasons why that might be justified. They address that actually, but really fast, I wanna talk about what the two sides had been pushing for. The prosecutor had said anything less than 4 years would be unacceptable. Obviously, we don't get anything near that. The defense had been pushing for a sentence of probation only, no time behind bars. And the reason was that this is beyond tragic. It's unintentional, it was an accident, it was a mistake, and the defense attorney held up a box of letters and cards of support. What does that have to do? How many cards need to be piled in a box before he comes back to life? It's great that she's getting support. What does that have to do with the consequences of her action? And the expectations we should have for cops that they should take seriously whether they are using a weapon that is potentially able to kill someone, because of course these less lethal weapons are, or that is almost guaranteed to kill someone. Should they take it seriously? Should other cops be really sure before they pull the trigger on whatever weapon it is that they happen to draw? They're not sure, just one of them. Anyway, the judge says that there's mitigating factors. It was undisputed that Potter never intended to use her gun. Well, she drew it. Again, you could be really, if the most important thing to you is to not fire a gun, there were some other measures that she could have taken. But she felt like she had to tase him, can't let him get away. After all, that would be inconvenient. We would have to follow him. Anyway, Chu says that there's 4 reasons for incarceration: retribution, incapacitation, deterrence, and rehabilitation, saying retribution would be the only purpose served in Potter's case. How is that true? How is that accurate? There's no deterrent to telling other cops, hey, it's not just like you roll the die when you draw one of the weapons from your belt, maybe you should be sure of which one it is. There's no rehabilitation, no extra time to think seriously about the power that you wield over life and death and how careful you should be when potentially meting it out. I don't know. Look, the judge in this case obviously had a side that they were on, and they have all the power in this case, so what do you know, they won.
Yeah, to me, the rehabilitation thing stuck out because in the judge's mind, cops are perfect anyway. So why would they have to be rehabilitated? It's just an honest mistake, and so somebody's dead, but he wasn't perfect. Cops are always perfect. They don't need deterrence, they don't need rehabilitation. And guys, if you're young, you don't get it, you're right. But what you're missing is the older generation got, and I'm in that older generation, we all got brainwashed into thinking that cops are angels. I'm not joking at all, I'm not exaggerating. Every program I ever saw, TV, movie, news, local news, national news, print news, video news, it doesn't matter. Everything that I'd ever seen told me cops are perfect. Cops never lie, they're always telling the truth on the stand, and the defendant is always lying. So I actually believed that when I was a kid. I did. It took me a long time to get past that. There would be cases where there would be overwhelming evidence that the cop planted something on the scene, and I wouldn't believe it because it was cognitive dissonance. Because I had been culturally brainwashed into thinking that cops were angels on earth. I remember when Ice Cube and NWA came out with the songs about the police, I was like, whoa, they really are gangster rappers. I mean, only gangsters would say terrible things about cops. Look, I grew up in a nice suburb. I had no freaking idea, okay? I liked the music, but I didn't understand it until later, okay? So this is a judge from the old school, thinks, I mean, an angel dropped down on earth and made a simple mistake. What, are we gonna really apply the law to her, right? Oh, sympathy for Daunte Wright, who's dead. Well, I'll get around to it, maybe, although I didn't really talk about it here. So, look, the last couple things. You have to understand, she got convicted of first and second degree manslaughter. Those are really serious charges, okay? And the judge basically told the jury, I don't care. I don't care about all the work that you did. I mean, it's so hard because of that programming to get a jury to ever say a cop is wrong in the first place. They do it in this case, and the judge goes, don't care, don't care.
Yes.
So look, for all the conservatives, by the way, look, I get that people sympathize with Potter. I get that a lot of people think it was an honest mistake. I understand that, right? But someone's dead anyway, right? And a taser's nothing like a gun. And so it's really weird, okay, fine, outrageous mistake, but that's the point John is making, that we have to make sure that cops understand it's not no big deal, made a mistake, he's dead, who cares, right? No, it's the guy, his life is gone, we cannot bring him back. We cannot bring him back. So a lot of people wrote in letters. Who cares? A lot of people wrote in letters for Rittenhouse, but honestly, a lot of people wrote in letters for O.J. Simpson. So that doesn't matter at all. And those letters are irrelevant. The jury's relevant. How many times have we been told, nope, the only people that matter is the jury, sequester them, everybody else's public opinion is irrelevant. Oh, everybody thinks that George Zimmerman did it. Who cares? It's irrelevant, irrelevant, irrelevant. Oh, jury acquitted him, too late, okay? And same thing with Rittenhouse. Now, the same people saying jury's the only thing that matters when it's Rittenhouse or Zimmerman who gets off, now turn around and go, no, jury is irrelevant. Wait, I thought you said it was the only relevant thing. Now you're saying it's irrelevant and we should let the cop off anyway. Gee, I wonder if you're biased.
Yeah.
I just have to put this in a broader context of how sad it is that we don't have real leadership when it comes to the most massive movement, social movement that I think I've ever seen in my lifetime, which is the Black Lives Matter in the streets movement. Sorry it didn't come in a nice, cute little letter on beautiful stationery to put in your box that you could hold up in front of everybody. No, young people took the goddamn streets, okay? They were out there for months and months and months and were thusly terrorized and cars driven into them, etc. And yet is any Democrat, is any leading Democrat taking up that mantle? Or are you using the idea that defund the police somehow hurt the Democrats to your political advantage? Oh yeah, it's the latter. Meanwhile, qualified immunity rolls on and criminals inside the police force and justice system are allowed to keep on committing this. And the last thing I'll say is, Cenk, you're totally right. People who have positive views of the police live in communities where there are no police. Of course you like police when you are privileged. You don't ever interact with them. You only call them when you need it. They don't parole your streets. They don't enforce curfews. They don't treat you like you are a foreign country that they are occupying. Of course you like police, and of course this is what we're all working against.
Yeah, I did an interview with a DJ in LA. He's Latino. He actually grew up partly in LA, partly in Arizona. He said it was worse in Arizona. I've told this story before. The cops would come and slam them against the fence when they were playing basketball or walking home from school 3 times a week. And he had to carry his report card with straight A's in it in his backpack to show the cops that they shouldn't beat him up too much. Okay, I never had to deal with that. I'm a minority, but I grew up in a relatively nice suburb. That to us would have been insane, unheard of. And if they had done that to one kid in that suburb, it would have been probably a national story. They do it to minorities all the time. And the people in power, including this judge now today, basically saying, don't care. All I care about is the cops' feelings and not your feelings. And by the way, also not your death. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.